I'm Tom. I'm the founder of a DeFi protocol that works with NFTs, actually a little bit similar to Gradient, who went just before. And we've been interacting with NFTs for a while now. As we were building our DeFi protocol, we kind of discovered NFTs in 2021, which was just a crucial and decisive year for the industry. I think that's when a lot of other people joined as well. And 2021 marked kind of a turning point for NFTs. It kind of started to win this race for crypto mass adoption, and that's a race that DeFi has been struggling with since 2017. So as the founder of a DeFi project, we kind of saw this evolution into the mainstream of NFTs, and we asked ourselves this question of how can we replicate that success, and what can we learn from the mainstream adoption of NFTs, and how can we replicate it into our own protocols. So the presentation is called How Can NFTs Fix DeFi? And before we check out how NFTs can fix DeFi, we'll have to see kind of what are the intrinsic problems of DeFi that have to be fixed. And that means going through some of the lessons that we've learned from NFTs, some of the user experience lessons from NFT protocols like OpenSea and StepN, as well as lessons from how NFTs are being implemented in the metaverse, and how we think that plays a part in the evolution of DeFi. So if we look at the data from Chainalysis, which is a great source, you see that DeFi is certainly growing, but what we figure out with the data is that despite its growth, it's actually more and more institutional, and the weight of the retail investor, our target demographic for DeFi, is actually shrinking. And the reason that's a problem is because all the values that DeFi tries to embody, so with decentralized finance, is creating a fairer alternative to our traditional financial system. But what we see with this new financial system is that it's being occupied by big players in the traditional one. So how can NFTs help us? Well, NFTs have become extremely popular with the retail investors with the same target demographic as DeFi. And so a targeted analysis of the growth of NFTs will actually help us, DeFi founders and DeFi protocols, be able to speak the language of retail. And so we have these values of wanting to democratize finance. That'll really go through capturing the NFT market. So yeah, there's a few reasons why we were able to see kind of this growth in NFTs. A couple of ones, first of all, the user friendliness, extremely visual. Another one was NFTs were slightly controversial, just controversial enough that it would make headlines, which obviously really helped for mainstream adoption. But one reason, kind of above all the other ones, that we saw the adoption of NFTs, in my mind, is the applications that were built on top, such as OpenSea, they really understood something, which was the usability of the apps. If you've ever interacted with DeFi, you'll know that it has one of the worst user experiences, and I say this as a DeFi founder. The user experience is one of the worst ones on the internet of any internet product or service. And the reason I say that is our infrastructure, blockchain, is slow. Often we have to pay for transactions that in Web 2 are simply faster, cheaper, or sometimes even free. Our interfaces to date, ours included, is still technical, and we have a long way to go before we can get the user friendliness of more traditional applications. And I think that when you look at these NFT projects, these NFT protocols that are highly successful, you look at Axie Infinity, StepN, OpenSea, what they do great is they really get to abstract away the complexity of blockchain infrastructure and have this very visual interface for people to play with. And so that's, again, very important to be able to speak to most users. It's not random that a lot of these applications that are working well for NFTs, such as StepN and OpenSea, have this mobile-friendly interface. That's really going to be a key component to the adoption of DeFi as well. And so when we look at, from a DeFi perspective, this growth of NFTs, what we learn from is it's going to be very difficult for us to pierce into the mainstream without at least one or two killer DeFi apps on our phones. And I think that that's what NFTs have shown really well. They've brought in this new wave of users from mobile, and today most users are on mobile. And I don't think DeFi is ready for that yet. So there's a couple reasons why I believe that we can learn from this. First of all, there's a very simple trade-off that's made by NFT protocols that's not made by DeFi protocols. And that trade-off is user experience over decentralization. So if we're able to look at this from an OpenSea's perspective, now OpenSea has gotten a lot of flack because it's not exactly a poster child for decentralization. But what they've managed to do is acquire and retain 94% of the Ethereum NFT market. And the reason that's really important is because understanding how they were able to do that will allow us, DeFi protocols, to understand how we can do the same with a much larger market. In fact, an incredibly larger market. You look at why NFTs are successful, they actually have some psychological triggers that DeFi doesn't have. Some of the two really important things with NFTs in particular would first of all be the almost, I don't want to say gambling, but the adrenaline rush that we get when we mint NFTs. I think everybody's here has minted before. That adrenaline rush is just incredibly attractive to a much wider range of people than yield is in DeFi. And another psychological trigger or psychological trait is the sense of affiliation that comes from NFTs. These NFT communities gather people around their project in a much stronger way than our DeFi projects do. And if you look at some of the DeFi projects that have tried to implement these two psychological triggers, right, the affiliation and the adrenaline rush, the one that I thought of was Olympus DAO, which I think they went from being kind of a banal treasury protocol, but because they have this speculation with bonds that are 5 days, that speculation along with the 3-3 meme that we've all seen in that very powerful community, that has actually allowed them to turn into one of the most successful DeFi projects, just because the addressable market is much larger than finance or yield or people who are interested in that. And so I think Abracadabra is also a great example. Fundamentally, they're very similar to their competitors, but the way that they're able to stand out and maintain their position in the market is simply by having this playfulness about it, this gamification, very similar to what we see with NFTs, and obviously their community, the Frog Nation, if you've heard of it, is very, very tied together. So if you kind of look at this trade-off of user experience over decentralization, and if you want to apply it to the world of finance with DeFi, it's actually already been done before. And where it's done is in the world of fintech. So fintech, it's kind of interesting. It's this alternate reality where the trade-offs that DeFi makes for security and trustlessness, instead, they kind of go in the way of user experience. And fintech's approach to the democratization of finance has been far more successful than DeFi's. And so, again, the fact that they're mobile friendly and the fact that Robinhood, Revolut, Mint, whatever fintech app you can think of is happening on mobile, whereas DeFi is happening on desktop. And that's another thing that NFT protocols like StepN, like OpenSea understand that we really have to apply in our world of DeFi. And so there's also more lessons to learn from NFTs. I think with gamification, good NFT projects really understand that they can gamify the user experience because it's so visual. One DeFi project that has attempted this, if you've heard of it, is DeFi Kingdoms. They have, I'm going to talk about it. I think it's such an amazing project. They have farms similar to what you would see in like Animal Crossing, but the farms are actually LPs. You harvest the farms, you harvest the yield. You can continue the metaphor, for as long as you want. That's one great way in which we can really gamify the interface for these protocols and have it in a very intuitive way for the user. Anybody can play video games, but not everybody can interact with DeFi today. And I think that that's, again, just another bottleneck where we have to take cues from what is being done in the world of NFTs. And so we've also kind of seen them treat more off-chain versus on-chain transactions, right? In these gamified worlds where we deal with DeFi and NFTs, a lot of it is actually happening off-chain, and that's why it's so simple to use. All of you have used OpenSea, and maybe you've minted NFTs on OpenSea. It's actually a gasless transaction, because what they understand is this doesn't have to happen on-chain. We can take our target demographic let them explore the protocol without running into the friction of on-chain transactions. And so if we're able to do this, then we just treat the protocol as a settlement layer for the off-chain user interface. NFT protocols do this all the time, but we've yet to really see DeFi protocols embrace this kind of user experience. So that, and again, that's being done a lot with the metaverse, for instance. It's a key aspect of the metaverse is how can we keep players immersed, and a key aspect of how we want to utilize NFTs in the metaverse is making sure that people can utilize the NFTs without knowing that they're NFTs. That is critical for the immersion of the player. But I would argue it's just similar with DeFi. You want to be able to keep the person engaged with your app without having the friction of the on-chain transactions. And I think that obviously the metaverse is a lot of things, but for DeFi founders in particular, it's a great opportunity to learn what can be done off-chain versus what can be done on-chain. It forces us to think a little bit more pragmatically about how do we serve this ideal of democratizing finance? How is it accessible if there's all the complications of cryptography? And so that's definitely something that we've been looking into a little bit further, as right now I'm part of a team that's building a DeFi protocol to fix problems in NFTs. But what I hope we get to see more of in the future, and what I hope people here are building, are NFT tools that can help us fix DeFi. Thank you.